Alright guys, well today I'm going to show you how I make my templates. I know a lot of different people like to use AutoCAD and everything, but I'm a paper and pencil type of guy. So one thing I like to do first is get the material. This is a 1.5 by 1.5 by 8-inch piece of square wood. This is poplar. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that up over here. This is regular graph paper. This is a 1/4. So every little square here is 1/4. 4 squares in any direction make 1 inch. I'm going to draw out on the paper the piece of wood that I'm using. So it's a 1.5, so that's 4 and 2. That gives us our 1.5. And I want to make this a 6-inch bait. Or maybe a 7-inch. So let's go ahead and measure out 7. So that's 1 right there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So within these boundaries is where I'm going to find my fishing lure. Alright, so I'm a firm believer sometimes that the lure is already in there. You just gotta find it. One thing that helps sometimes is to make sure to plot out your halfway point. So 3/4 is the halfway for this particular piece of wood. And since we did 7 inches, we're going to do 3.5. Alright. Okay. I like to start at the face end, which is over here, so I usually follow the middle line. Then I mark out around where tops I want it to be, and the sloping curve of the tail. So I usually take this as my actual center line because that's going to be sometimes the through wire, and right around here when I finish the design I'll make sure I put the belly hook hanger. So let's do a nice simple one. So you can plot it from here to here, make it nice and straight almost, and then I like to kind of curve it in from here. The apex, or the highest point right here, that's where I'm going to start the curve. This can definitely lead into the edges of the outside of the piece of wood. Then I like to get a nice gentle slope going back. So this almost reflects the same curvature, just a slight differential as to when they start curving down. Now the important part, figuring out the belly of it, how you want it to look. So I like to play around a lot. One thing that makes it easier, especially if you're starting out making these templates, leave a little gap right here about a 1/4 or 1/8. I usually do a 1/4. Then you can take it down to a 45. And then whichever length you want it, you can bring it down in a straight line. So this right here would mark your belly. Then I usually like to come to the tail, see where I like to finish, and from here I'll start curving it up. So you can start at the tail, then make your way down towards the belly, and then pop it in there. So this is going to be a very large bait. Well, not very, but a rather large bait. It's for doing some beach fishing or surf casting. So once I have my main lines, I kind of like to refine it a little. I like to play around. Alright, so now that I have my, outline of it, I sometimes like to either stay with it or start bringing some of the further details in. So I sometimes like a sharper nose, so I'll start doing that. to do with this one is weight it near the back. So because I want it to cast far, go ahead and take about a 1/2 inch, and then right around here do another 1/2 inch. And this can definitely change. I just do this to kind of, it helps you with the action. So these 2 points are going to be the heaviest. In the water, these 2 points are going to be the ones that want to move. So this right here will do a perfect walk the dog. So personally, sometimes I have a hardest issue with making the face and deciding the dimensions. You know what? For the most part, I feel it out. There's really not much, so I start by, I guess this is where I want the eye. There's no particular size. So I try to make it as round as I can. Alright, so for the most part that looks okay to me. So next comes the mouth. So usually I like to kind of just start right in the middle and just kind of curve it out and then curve it down. Alright, it looks pretty good. So now the actual gill plate. So sometimes I like to do a little thing right there, just eyeball it. Kind of do little ticks. So from here, I don't like that. So let's curve it. I'm going to curve it down. Kind of feels like that would be perfect right there. And then bring it around. Alright, so far so good. For the face template, I kind of like to finish it off with a few guiding lines so I can cut it out from the aluminum duct tape, which holds pretty well. So that's going to be on the aluminum tape. From here you can draw a couple of different things. I sometimes like to just kind of, feel it out, see what's going on, and you can always take it off at the end. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm not so sure about that. That looks alright. Okay, so that's the face. So seeing as how this is the middle point where I'm going to put the through wire, I can go ahead and draw out what it would look like. So that would be the through wire. I kind of want to put the hook hanger right here. There's no particular reason, it just looks good right there for me. Alright, now the fun part. We can start adding some detail. And you can think of what type of finish you want. I usually like to bring just a little curve right here because this gives me the template for the aluminum siding if I want to put something on there. So basically I'm just drawing out what I envision it to look like when it's finished.
that's looking pretty good. Now, I sometimes like to bring in a little bit of a gap between the faceplate or the gill plate and the rest of the flashing. Alright, so let's just bring in a little soup. I kind of feel like it should have a little soup or a lateral line. Again, all of this can be changed depending on how you feel at the end. I just sometimes like to draw it out. So, I like to bring in that eyeball in sometimes, gives it a little more realism so I can see what it really will look like. Alright, that's looking pretty good, so let's clean up a few things here and there. Clean up a few lines. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now, one of the easiest scaling patterns that you can do, especially with the holographic finish we're going to give this, is just diagonal lines. Obviously, since I'm doing these by hand, they're not going to be the greatest, but you can see what it would look like. So you would do this all the way down. Then you just come back at the same angle in the opposite direction. Now, to keep these nice and even, make sure you start at the cross section of the top line. Alright, that looks pretty good, so we'll go ahead and finish it off. Now, sometimes I go a little overboard with my templates and then I get lazy, so try to avoid that. Alright, so that's what it would look like. Alright, so this is it. I have my template. From this I can get the template for the face, position of the eye, and the template for the side flashing. The weights over here can be easily transferred down here, and I have a 1/2 inch Fosner bit that will actually help me out a lot with this. So these are 1/2 inch holes. And it's weighted to the back because I want this to cast far. Well, the video for making this lure is going to come out in a bit. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.